Hi friends, it's Marie at LivingFelt. Today we have a very special treat for you. We're going to go on a field trip and visit our BFF, Laura Ricks in Lafayette, Indiana. For each of us, our creative space is unique and different. Sometimes it's the armchair in your family room with the kitty or dog curled next to you. Maybe your fiber supplies live in a bin under a table somewhere, and maybe you have your own studio space. Whatever it is, it's a sacred space for you to create your art. Something we find really fun and inspiring is to visit each other's studio and see how we store our things and how we set up our creative space for maximum inspiration. Today is an opportunity for just that with our friend and teacher on feltingtutorials.com, Laura Ricks of Emerald Hill Textiles. We have a special opportunity to visit with Laura in her hometown, get to see parts of her home, and most importantly, take a sneak peek inside of the drawers and bins and cabinets of her studio to see how she likes to organize her fiber and tools. So if you're ready, grab your notebook and let's go to Laura's house.
Come on in. Hello, my name is Laura Ricks and welcome to my art studio. Behind me is where I store all my wool supplies. My desk is where I create my artwork, and over to my left is where I store the items I need to run my business. Come on in and let's take a closer look.
Laura, thank you so much for letting us come in and snoop around your studio and see your workspace. I'm excited to get into the details. Tell us, what were the major goals you had for your studio when you were setting it up?
So the latest reorganization that I did was probably about a year ago. And the main goal was to just make sure that I had a place for everything so that when it came time to clean up, I could do it really quickly, even if everything was a big giant mess. And I wanted a space that I could feel really happy in, content, things looked nice, it didn't feel overwhelming. And so I love having all the colorful wool behind me, and being able to easily access things as well was a big deal.
Yeah, well, I look forward to you giving us more insight on those, especially how to keep your studio clean. Organizing to keep your studio clean, that seems like a really good goal to have. Everything is in its place, so beautifully organized and displayed, and full 360, like everywhere you look in your studio, it's organized and attractive at the same time.
And I don't have a huge space. I mean, this is what was supposed to be our formal dining room, and I just kind of took it over. And so with all the supplies that I have, I've kind of just tried to utilize every inch of wall space that I can to pack it all in and still keep it looking nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's very obvious a working studio and pretty singularly focused, meaning that's where you create. I like that you've used a lot of shop bought storage solutions, and it looks like you've also isolated by fiber type. Everything's organized by different breeds or microns or whatever. Is that true?
Yeah, so I have my merino tops are directly behind me in the open spaces, and then off to the sides are well, I guess this side is my short fiber wool, and then over here I have like some of my blends and my pre-felts and things like that. And then in the baskets I have a lot of my embellishment fibers.
It looks like you have some keys on the outside of your bins that tell you what's inside.
I wanted to be able to quickly see what I was looking for and what's in each each bin. So I wanted to know what color was in there, and I took a bunch of my old contact lens
Oh,
cases.
that's
So
right.
I wear contact lenses, and for some reason I've just kept them. And I use the little hollowed out area to put like a little swatch of my wool and what colors in that bin, and then I just covered it with a clear piece of tape and hot glued it into the outside of the container, and then I have like a really pretty way to see what's in each container.
That's fantastic. So awesome. It's so fun that we get to see a sneak peek of you with a work in progress and your working boxes.
Yeah, so those were from like a local hardware store that I just went in, and I think they were super cheap, maybe like less than $10 each. And they have like little dividers that you can move around to, so you can make a bigger space or a smaller space. But I have mostly the smaller spaces. And I noticed that a lot of the times when I was pulling out like a whole shoebox full of, maybe 4 colors of blue, I would just get like a whole desk full of these boxes, and it was a giant mess. So I took one swatch of every color of like my MC1s and my short fiber wools that I needle felt with, and filled them up by color. And that way, when I need all my yellows out, I can pull that one container, open it up, and have them all there. Because usually I'm just working with small bits at a time when I'm doing like 2D pieces.
Mm-hmm. Oh, to be a fly on the wall.
I actually have that piece finished behind me now.
So sweet.
Thank you. So there I was laying out the background for it, and I just wanted a nice soft blend of colors for the background. So I laid those all out, and then I went ahead and wet felted my background, and then worked on needle felting the caterpillar on top. So that's what I've been doing the last week or so in my studio.
And this is pretty normal setup for you. You work at your table on your tabletop ESA with the natural daylight next to you.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing that I wish was a little better about my studio. I don't have great overhead lighting. So I try to get my work done during the day when I have good outdoor light coming in. Because once I switch to my overhead lighting, it gets kind of dicey figuring out what colors I'm using.
Especially because you're doing so many things that are true to life. That color choice selection really, really matters for you. Now, is that where you normally wet felt, on your kitchen countertop there?
It is. And I really like that, because then I feel like I'm a part of my family. If I'm in there wet felting and the family's hanging out, I get to be like in the space, and I can watch whatever they're watching on TV. And it's just nice to have good access to the sink and not making a big mess with water going everywhere. So that's where I end up doing my wet felting.
Yeah, it looks like a fantastic place to wet felt. Absolutely. Super sweet. For the most part, Laura, your pieces are within a certain size, but some of your pieces are larger. So when you have a bigger piece, how do you tackle that?
I have these really large cutting mats that are almost like the size of my kitchen table. They're huge. And so I'll lay this really large, like self-healing cutting mat out on my kitchen table so that I know none of the water is going to get down onto the table. And then I'll use that as my felting surface if I'm doing something really large.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great workaround, is to have that. And you don't overwater, you don't roll, you're using the palm washboard, right? 99% of the time. So there's not water running everywhere. Yeah. Fantastic. That's a great solution. And do you keep pretty steady hours in your studio? Are you in your studio every day from a certain time to a certain time, or how do you work that?
Pretty much every day that I can be, I am. So I try to be done by about maybe like 6 o'clock. I try to be done and start thinking about supper and time with family and things like that for the evening. So unless I have other commitments during the day, I'll be in here working.
And it looks like a really great space to be and work. I love your display of your Kimberly Pulley art.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Laura, what inspired you to do that unique display for your hoops? It's fantastic.
I just wanted a pretty way to display them, and they were taking up so much space, and they were always cluttered, and I have so many different sizes. So my daughter actually had just painted one of the walls in her room black, and she had this leftover paint. So I just decided, this might be a fun way to utilize that extra paint and paint some different size rectangles according to what size hoop I was going to have there. So, and it's so much nicer to look at than what I was looking at before.
Right. It's a great example of form and function, aesthetically pleasing, but you can go right to the item you need, and it's not taking up that valuable real estate where all your drawers are. It's up where, what else can you put up there?
And it didn't cost me anything but time. It was just the paint, and then I just have the hoops hung up on nails. So it was super cheap.
Super smart too. We love your sign, Laura. Now, do you keep it on display normally in your studio, or was that special just for us?
It used to be where the Kimberly pulley is, but now I have Kimberly pulley there. And I try to take it to shows and hang it on the outside of my booth. So, it just kind of hangs out wherever it fits at the moment.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, I love having it up there for today. I think it's really special. Well, it's a real treat to get to see you working in your space, to see your working boxes too. Those are beautiful. We got to see your MC1 bins. Now, your wool neps bin looked very similar to those. Are those portions of your nep stash in that bin, or is that a packet of neps in each of your little spots?
That's all my neps. All my neps are in those two containers. And a lot of them will shove down into those bins. So it's really handy.
I love that you have them open and ready to grab.
That's just where I keep those little, containers that we've been talking about. And those shelves are the latest addition to my studio because I needed easy access to those little containers. And so then I went ahead and added some of I've been buying a lot of the Bergschaf wool, and I hadn't been buying that previously. So, those went up on that shelf, and it's just a good place to keep extra things. Again, just utilizing like every inch of wall space that I have for storage. And this one, I think I have my silk hankies and sari silk waist. And another one of my baskets, I have bamboo and silks. So I try to keep them organized by color, but it doesn't usually stay that way for very long. Like they don't always look so nice.
It's definitely just warms my heart seeing all that LivingFelt packaging across your studio. It's really an honor to be in your amazing artwork. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for including me in the LivingFelt family.
Yeah. Well, we're grateful, and all of your students just do such fantastic work. So that makes it triply fun. I see you pretty much like to order by type, which I resonate with as well. But is there anything beyond that when you're thinking of how you're compartmentalizing your supplies?
Yeah, well, like for instance, with the two baskets of silks that are right next to each other. So in one of them is the silks that I've gotten through LivingFelt, like the Sari Party silks, and I feel like I know those are gonna felt. So those are tried and true gonna felt, and so I don't worry too much when I'm using those. I know that I can just grab them and Nuno felt whatever I want to do. But then the other bin is more like clothing items and scarves and things like that maybe I want to test first or try a sample on before I do anything with it. So, tried and true versus kind of sketchy or needs some experimentation. But for the most part, everything is just ease of access. So just if I know what type of fiber I'm going for, I can grab out the bin and have all of it kind of at my fingertips.
Well, I really have to say you've really optimized that space there and done a beautiful job of it. I love how orderly it is. I feel like anyone could go in there and find what they wanted in not knowing where anything is. They would find it pretty quick.
In one of those containers, I have stored all my little Nuno felted fabrics that I've made. And, sometimes I've sampled with them, or at Christmas time, I made a bunch of like alpacas and snowmen, and I'll cut those up and make little scarves or hats out of that fabric. So I always keep anything that I have left. And then I have a container that's full of the silk fabrics that I've made, the little silk papers that I did from one of the Woolly Wednesdays. I've been playing around with that a lot and having a lot of fun with those silk papers. And I have to point out that one of those shoe boxes is full of baby socks, because I watched your Woolly Wednesday where I think you made a sweater for your raccoon out of this little baby sock, and I just like went crazy with the baby socks and the sweater making.
I remember your cute little videos that you were sharing on Instagram at that time. Wasn't there a little dinosaur that you were sharing? Yes. And he was getting into adventures? He was
wearing all kinds of sweaters.
That's really fun.
So this is just where I have all those miscellaneous supplies that I use, a lot of crafting supplies, work in progress ornaments, little trinkets for Christmas time. I have my business cards down there, embroidery floss. Some of those are just wool scraps. I have paintbrushes, paints, balloons, felt sheets, all kinds of papers, and make some googly eyes here because I love putting googly eyes on things. Just any little craft object you can think of, I try to have labeled and handy. So you have like a tub of work in progress pieces, and then ribbons, yarns, all of that.
That's fabulous.
So I have a basket for my camera equipment, and then one of my baskets I keep like when I'm cleaning up my workspace and I have just those little tiny bits of wool that I don't know what to do with. I'll grab them and I save them all in a bag. So I keep everything.
Yeah, I like the way you come up with aesthetically pleasing storage solutions for things that are kind of clunky and funky, like the cables. You need those for shows and things like that. Is that right?
I do. Or if like I'm trying to make a video for Instagram, or even just have my phone plugged in my studio, maybe it needs charged, or I have a light that needs charged, I can pull those out and move them around where I need them to be.
Just bin after bin of opportunity and inspiration, Laura.
Yeah.
Out of the different types of fiber storage that you set up in your fiber studio, do you have favorites?
I love the way the little storage containers with the contact lenses and the colors look, but I love how easy it is to just grab my merino top, and it's so openly displayed, which I know a lot of people don't want with their wool, but I'm in here so much that I don't worry too much about it getting bothered by moths or anything like that. So, the ease of access for that is really nice for me. And those are just like hanging shoe containers that I,
right.
Yeah. So
I feel like I could just fall right into that picture there, Laura.
So that's the biggest piece I've ever done. I don't typically work on a large scale. I think that one might be about 4 feet wide, maybe 3 feet high, something like that. It was a lot of needle felting too. So that one took quite a long time. And then I decided to sew a little bit of threads into it, things like that. I just did a lot of experimenting and layering of colors, but I had a lot of fun with that. And I liked how soft it turned out.
It's incredible. And I think it's a little challenging to get the scale in that clip that we saw, but on your Instagram, you have some wonderful photos that really reveal how big it is as you're working on it, because you have work in process imagery.
Yeah.
Right. Is that piece behind glass?
It's behind acrylic. So it's a museum acrylic. So it's anti-glare, anti-scratch, anti-static, all that stuff.
Right. You couldn't see any glare at all. That's amazing. That's a really fun peek into your sketchbook, Laura. What would you like to tell us about that?
I feel like sometimes I'll do a project and then, later on I'll want to come back to it, but I won't remember what colors I used or how I blended them. So if I'm working on a piece and I'm really enjoying the way that it's turning out, and I think I might want to reference it again later or possibly even teach it in a class, I'll go ahead and grab some swatches of my wools before I put them away and kind of tape them into my sketchbook and maybe make some notes about how I blended them, or even try color blends out on the sheet of paper before I felt them, kind of lay them over each other and lay them out as far as like how I want my sky to look. So, the sketchbook, I'm not really sketching, but it becomes a pretty handy place to store some of my thoughts about my wool.
I love that you're keeping like a journal, basically,
Mm-hmm.
a journal of what you did so you can refer back to it. I think that's a very inspiring takeaway for sure, for people to keep reference of what they did. Yeah, with the fiber, not just the notes, but keep that's
right.
Super. Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that you have space for works in progress. Now, are some of those 2D, or are they more like some of the smaller things you sell at shows or the fairs, or what are those works in process comprised of?
Most of them are 2D. They're pretty much all 2D. And they're things that maybe I'm getting stuck on and I'm just feeling like I'm spinning my wheels or spending too much time stressed out about it, not really in the right mindset for it. And, sometimes I just put it away for a while until I'm ready to come back to it with a new thought or a new approach, or maybe I have a different idea of how to come at it. And sometimes they'll sit for a year because I just don't have it figured out yet. But, you are always improving your skills and learning new things. So I just hope that someday I'm going to have that aha moment and get back to it and finish it the way that I want to. So.
And when you put that project away, do you put fibers away with it? Or do you just reference your notebook pages where you had the fiber swatches? How do you tackle that?
For the most part, it's usually in a state that I can pretty easily see where I was at, where I'm going with it. I can look at the colors. A lot of them are needle felted together enough that I have, the swatches and samples are already just contained in the piece itself. But yeah, sometimes I have notes in my notebook but sometimes I don't want to go at it the way I was going at it at all. So I wouldn't even really want to look at my notes. I'd want to just come at it with a completely fresh brain.
Super smart, and definitely points to the way you are, which is incredibly organized, meticulously detailed. Okay, so what's your pup's name?
That's Rocky.
So cute. Great finish to that clip. Tell us about your furry friends, Laura.
So, I would prefer them to stay off of my desk, but it's almost like my desk is kind of like a cat trap because it gets this great sunbeam coming in, and then there's this bush outside that's always full of birds. So there's no way to really keep them completely away from it, which again is why it's nice to have everything in like a little bin so that I can cover it up while I'm working on it and not let the cats lay on it. But they really love laying up here on my desk.
I could see why. It looks very toasty and warm.
Yeah, there's Rocky. And that's Belle. She's a Great Pyrenees, and she typically enjoys being outside or wherever's coldest. So if it's winter here in Indiana, she's typically outside, but if it's summer, she loves to come in and lay on the air conditioning vents. And she's adjusting to having a puppy around. Rocky's not a year old yet, so Belle's about 8. so she's trying to adjust to his energy levels, I think. In the basement is where I keep all the supplies that I use for my framing. We could take the stairs, but let's go the fun way and take the slide. Let's go.
Before we talk about the glass cutting booth, tell us about that slide.
So when we built this house, my husband and I were just getting married, and we had, I had 2 kids, he had 3 kids. They were all, I think, 12, 13 and under. So that was my idea. I said, we can build a house, but I want a slide in the house. And so the builder was kind of like, Okay, I've never had that request before, but he did it for one of the first times I went down it. I went down so fast that my knees actually went through the wall at the bottom. And I had two little knee prints in the wall. And I had to make something to cover up the holes in the wall and also keep other people from crashing at the bottom.
That's really fun. I've never known anyone who has a slide in their house, but now I do. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the glass cutting booth and doing your own work in that regard.
Well, I have more storage down in the basement, of course. I keep some of my tools and things like that in there. And then I have this big table. It's mostly covered by cutting mats. And then I just have all these framing supplies. So when I first started having my artwork framed, I met a woman that was really wanting help in her frame shop. I think she got sick of framing my things, but she said if I wanted to come in and frame them myself, she would teach me how to frame them and she would give me the supplies at cost. And so we had this little trade going on where I was kind of working for her and helping her frame the things that she needed to get framed. And then I was also able to learn about framing my pieces as well. And then she ended up retiring and selling her business. But when she retired, I was able to purchase a lot of the equipment and things like that. So those tables came from her, and my husband was great enough to take them all apart and put them back together again in the basement for me. And, now I have all this framing equipment everywhere. So I have a lot of mats and a glass cutter, and I'm fortunate enough to know, how to use that to an extent. So, one of the kids that has gone off to college, I've taken over their bedroom. And so this is where I use to I have like a little booth that I can film things in. And then these are all the mat boards. It's a color that I don't really like. I could always cover it with fabric and use it still. I have more rails of wood for framing, and then all of the pre-made frames. I was able to get a lot of frames from her, and then I'm always looking for frames when I'm out. So I check the clearance sections of stores a lot for their custom frames. And then over there is like wood rails to make frames out of. She gave me all kinds of rice papers. That's where I store all my glass and acrylic. And then just to prove I've taken over like basically every corner of my house. This is like a utility area, but that's where I keep my booth for my shows. And then over on the other wall, my husband installed the glass cutter for me. And so then I have like a big trash can where I can put like the glass scraps down in.
That is just amazing. It's so impressive and inspiring to see your dedication to your craft from point A to point B, like every aspect of it. It's just pretty much a wow factor, Laura. Considering how much you exhibit and show and sell your work, it must really be a nice cost savings. Although you had to invest in all the equipment and all the materials, but still you don't have to go and pay to have each piece framed and mounted.
Right. And I did get, she gave me a really good deal on the equipment. So, I think she needed it to go and I needed to have it. So it worked out well. That was a really nice relationship to have had.
Yeah, very cool. And good job on your husband, Dan, so supportive and setting that up for you.
Always.
That's so nice.
He's my biggest fan for sure.
Yeah. So sweet. Well, now I think we have some shots that are around your home, which is such a beautiful place where you and your family live. So tell us a little bit about these glimpses that you shared into your world.
We're fortunate enough to live on about 8 acres of land, and we have a big field behind us. And that's where I get just a lot of my inspiration. I was, just walking down the trails one day and saw this swarm of bees. They were docile. They weren't attacking. And then I have tons of monarch butterflies that come in the fall. This was a day that they were just all over in the goldenrod back behind our house. Get inspiration like my little monarch caterpillar that I'm doing. We have milkweed out there that they lay their eggs on and they hatch out of their cocoons, and that's the sky over the field. So I get like lots of images of clouds and sunsets and things like that just looking out my back window. There's a little storm moving in, and I always love that look of like a dark gray sky with a bright green field. So we have these trails cut into the field where we can go out and walk, and that's typically where we walk the dog. And there's usually bunnies, and we have trail cams set up so we can see all the critters that are running around. We get lots of raccoons and possums and deer. It's just a really nice space.
It's absolutely beautiful. I can see why you draw a lot of your inspiration just from your own land, your own backyard. It's so fun. And I think we get to see a little glimpse also of the town where you live. So just let's go have a coffee or something and tell us about your town.
So this is downtown Lafayette. And it's really nice because there's lots of artwork and murals on the walls of the downtown building. There's a train station, a depot downtown. So that's a pedestrian walkway where you can go from Lafayette over to West Lafayette, where Purdue campus is. And that's the Wabash River, just overlooking it. And that's where they launched the fireworks on the 4th of July. And there's our courthouse. It's just a really nice downtown area. Nice place to go. McCord's Candy has the best soda fountain. You get like your flavored sodas there, lots of candy. It's really good. Coming up here is the gallery that I've been part of for the last few years, Artist Own. Yeah, that's downtown Lafayette.
It looks like a great little downtown. Like the buildings aren't too tall. It's not,
right.
It's still very quaint.
Oh, and this is Turkey Run. This is one of my favorite places to hike nearby. So this is about an hour from our house, and we go hike here pretty often. This day that it had just rained, it was just like foggy and misty and beautiful. It almost felt like just being someplace in another time, like just gorgeous there.
Yeah, that is a really beautiful place. And is that like a nature preserve, Turkey Run?
Yeah, it's a state park.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, what a treat, Laura, to get to see intimately inside your studio spaces. Beyond bins, drawers, and baskets, your every arm where you have in the house taken over with your art. And yeah, it's just fantastic. Very inspiring, and makes us all want to be a lot more organized than we currently are.
It didn't happen overnight. So, this started with like one small rack of shoe boxes with wool. I mean, and it has just expanded over the years. So as I've needed more and more space.
So if someone's just getting started, maybe they have all their fiber in, 1 to 3 tubs. What advice would you give them for beginning to organize their supplies?
Think about what you need to stay in your creative space. So to keep your mind free of clutter and just really feel like you're able to work happily in your space, like what do you need for that? And, keep things easily accessible and try to develop a way to put everything back in its place when you're done. And start small. So just start with your immediate needs and don't think of something like on this big of a scale, because I never would have, dreamt of this when I first started felting. But, just start small. And then I've repurposed so many of the pieces that I started out with originally and just worked them into my design as I've gone. So just do your best to stay organized, whatever works for you.
I think that's good, solid advice. And we really appreciate you sharing it with us and letting us get to crawl around under your desk and pet your critters. And
well, I thank you for coming and visiting me.
It's so fun. Laura, if you were to call out a few of your favorite things, whether you're felting needles or tools or fibers, what would they be?
Well, I love my yellow triangle needles for sure. I use those pretty much every day. I got like that wood handled multi tool that holds, I don't know, is it
8?
like, I don't, 8 needles maybe? Like it's
The
quite a
punch it?
few. Yep, I love that. And then I'm constantly using the pre-felt. And then I love the bamboos that have like the variegation in them,
Mm-hmm.
like the variegated colors that like just blend into one another that you can put in a sky. Those are beautiful. So those are one of my favorite fibers.
Well, now that we know that, we would like to group some of those up and use them for the prizes on today's show. Laura, it's such a treat to visit with you. Before we go, let's tell folks where they can see and buy your art right now.
So I do a lot of shows throughout the summer usually. Typically they're in Indiana. So I usually do Round the Fountain, I think it's Memorial Day weekend. And then I do Art on the Wabash, which is in the fall, usually the end of September. And then in Indianapolis, I usually participate in the Pinrod Art Fair, which also happens in September, I think usually around Labor Day weekend. So those are the 3 big shows that I usually do each year. And then, of course, you can check me out on Instagram at Emerald Hill Textiles, and then Emerald Hill Textiles on Facebook. And then emeraldhilltextiles.com is my website, so you can always send me a message through there if you'd like to purchase something.
Laura, thank you so much for the tour of your home and studio. I hope one day I get to try the slide, and we look forward to having you back again very soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for stopping in.
I'm really glad we all got a chance to visit Laura and see her home studio. I know you found it really inspiring. And if you'd like to learn more from her, these are an example of the classes that she has in the online school. She's a fantastic 2D artist and will really share with you her tips and techniques for getting gorgeous landscape and imagery in wool just like these. Well, this was a really fun field trip, and we're going to have more for you. So check out our channel for other studio visits or explorations on our way. And if you would like more 2D needle felting, try this video right here.